So now onto one of my favorite parts, and that's becoming a virtual photographer. So we already had this camera set up, and we're going to set up a couple of others and then start some renders. So let's start an interactive render, and I'll make that full screen. And now we can take a look at some of the tone mapping. So the only thing I'm really going to do in here is just add a lookup table, and you can enable that. And then we can choose which lookup table we want by pressing up and down on the keyboard and cycle through until you see something you like the look of. And it doesn't have to be this intensity. So if you like something, you can always then bring down the opacity of the lookup table so it's not as intrusive. So I had a little look earlier and I quite liked this guy here on something like 0.3. I thought that looked pretty good, but go through, choose your own. And then another thing I'd like to do is add some vignette, and let's turn that up. And if I turn that on and off, you can see what that's doing. Feels a little bit oversaturated, so we can pull down the saturation a tiny bit as well. We can also play with the white balance as well a touch. And I think something like that's looking pretty nice. So I'm going to stop that render and let's now set up some other cameras. So I'm going to press P on the keyboard and Z, and we're going to zoom in on this bread. And then I'm just going to create a camera view I want. So something like this. And then we can use the plus camera icon to create a camera from the view. And then we can hone this in a little bit more using the dolly camera. We can orbit the camera a little bit and just set up a view you like the look of. So something like that looks pretty cool. One thing I've noticed is our hobs are intersecting. So I've just selected that. I'll right click, select move, and then I'll just use the move dialog down here. And let's start an interactive render. I'm going to make this smaller so we can see what we're doing. And we can also select our camera by clicking on the camera and select camera. So this looks pretty nice, but we can also add some depth of field to this. And we just need to click enable depth of field. And I'm going to minimize the viewport, and in the top view, let's select our camera's target. And now the target is what is going to be in focus. So if I pull that towards our bowl and our cup, we can see that this background is now becoming blurry. So let's select the camera again. And the f-stop controls the amount of depth of field. So the lower this number, the more blur, and the higher will be less blur. And if we hover over this, we'll see that the standard values used in photography are listed here. So if you stick to these, you're going to get more realistic results. So if we put in 8 and press enter, we can see that the background is a lot more blurry. And if I put something in like 22, it's going to be a lot less blurry. But I quite like 16. So that's another camera angle for us to use. So I'm going to stop that render. And just going back to our previous camera angle, if we run the interactive render again, we want to enable bloom and glare as well, which you can find here. And if I let that render a minute and then turn on bloom and glare, you'll see this progress bar. And when it comes in, you'll see we just get this nice little glare on our image and in some certain hotspots as well. So I'm going to leave that on as well for our renders. And let's add another camera angle. So I'm going to select this guy, P and Z, and let's set up a camera. I think something like this could be cool. And of course, you can go and do your own camera angles. Let's add, I'm going to have to close this because there's not a lot of real estate on the screen. Add a camera, and let's change this field of view to 60 so we can see more. and the depth of field is already on. And something else we can do is use auto vert tilt, and that's just going to straighten up our verts, although it didn't really seem like we needed it. Let's pan that, but I think that's looking pretty good. Let's run an interactive render and see if we've got another camera angle there. That looks pretty cool. We could zoom in a touch, and let's also make sure that our target's correct, but that looks great. Let's do one more shot, but basically using the tips I've just shown you, you can go around, create some camera angles you like. Something like that might be cool. Quite like the idea of having one around this angle. Let's add the camera. We'll select the camera. And let's change this field of view to 45. And I'll zoom out. And that's quite a cool shot. Let's make sure depth of field is on. And in the top view, what we can do is right click and select camera target. And then we can target what we want to be in focus. So let's make the back wall in focus and run an interactive render. And that's quite a nice shot as well. All right, so we've got 4 shots there. Go through, create as many as you like. And when you're happy with the cameras, all we need to do is go to the render setup. And I want each of our images at 4K, so let's hit the 4K button, and that means the resolution is going to be this amount of pixels wide and this amount of pixels high. And then under scene, we want to set a noise limit. And if we turn on Corona high quality denoising, then a noise limit of 5 should work well. And now all we have to do, let's start with camera 1. So press C on the keyboard and select camera 1. And I'll hit render. And this will keep rendering until it hits a noise limit of 5%, which is here. So just let that render out, and when it's done, we'll save it and we'll move on to the next one. All right, so that's finished rendering, and we can hit save, and I'll just type in camera001.jpg, enter to save that. And now I'll go to a camera viewport, press C on the keyboard, and we'll go to camera 2. And again, I'll hit render and let that render out. So now I'll just go through each camera, render them out, and save each image.